Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to SLMOOC 2017. This is Friday, June 16th, and today we'll be having Metaverse Libraries Connecting Communities as Resources, a project of the Community Virtual Library and NMA Incorporated. Our three speakers today will be Dr. Valerie Hill, Dr. Marie Vans, and Alyse Dunvant-Jones. And please correct me if I've got the names wrong. We're going to be joining a network with the goal of connecting virtual world communities across grids. The Community Virtual Library strives to help connect digital citizens with virtual world resources and with other virtual world communities, both in Second Life and elsewhere. I'm going to tell you a little bit about our speakers. Dr. Valerie Hill received her MLS from Texas Woman's University in 2007 and a PhD in Library and Information Science in 2012. Val is a librarian and information science educator, with a research focus on the intersection of information literacy and global participatory culture. She has taught at all age levels, served as a school librarian, and is a national writing project trainer. Working in virtual worlds for the past decade, her focus has been providing virtual world resources and archiving immersive learning experiences through machinima. For the past decade, she has worked on embedding information literacy, particularly digital citizenship, in curriculum, online learning platforms, and virtual worlds. She's presented at conferences both physically and virtually, and currently serves as the president of the Community Virtual Library in Second Life. A current project is a virtual world database of learning environments and communities. Alyse Dunavant-Jones has known since high school that she wanted to be a librarian and that the MLIS degree was part of the path to achieving her goal. After volunteering in the local middle school library during high school and then working in a public library in college, she graduated with a bachelor's degree in English and a minor in information technology. Her interest in digital libraries remained strong, and she started looking at MLIS graduate schools. Shortly after entering the I-School, Dunavant-Jones became enraptured with archives and knew she had found a way to bridge all of her library and archives interests. She's now halfway through the program, exploring the best of both worlds. And finally, the first speaker up today, Dr. Marie Vans. She is integrating, I guess her portion of the talk is integrating virtual worlds experience into an SJSU iSchool e-portfolio. She's a PhD research scientist at Hewlett-Packard. An author of over 50 technical papers and holder of 20 U.S. patents, Vans started working at Hewlett-Packard before college. The company supported her undergraduate studies and then hired her again after she received her PhD in computer sciences from Colorado State University. She first worked in software development in Fort Collins, Colorado, and then for HP Labs in Haifa in Israel, where among other projects she developed an image inspection algorithm deployed in today's Indigo commercial printing presses. Now back in Fort Collins, she works in the HP's Print Adjacencies and 3D Laboratory. If you go to the SLMOOC headquarters in the Integrating Technology building and click on the wallboard for this presentation, you'll not only get a longer version of all three of the biographies, but also links that are included there to go out and see blogs and websites and other things. So I'd like to say thank you to all three of you. We're really looking forward to this presentation today. And Marie, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you can hear me. Great. Okay. Well, I'm going to use Speakeasy today because that is something that I almost always do anyway for the people who might not be able to hear me very well. I wanted to say good afternoon and welcome to our talk, Metaverse Libraries Communities as Resources, which is part of the 2017 Second Life MOOC series. My name is Marie Vans, as you just heard in First Life, and Amvans, Lapis, and Second Life. During the day, I'm a senior research scientist at HP Labs, where I work on document analytics and image processing challenges. But my superpower is interest in learning and using virtual worlds for librarianship and teaching. Today, I'll be sharing the stage with two of my colleagues, Dr. Valerie Hill and Alyse Dunavant-Jones, and I will give you a quick overview of the history of virtual librarianship. I'll talk to you a little bit about different virtual worlds in which librarians have worked, and I'll show you how librarians have brought librarianship to those worlds. I will then hand off the talk to Val, who will talk about the future of librarians in virtual worlds and how they are already creating communities across multiple worlds. And finally, Alyse will talk about an important project that has come out of the collaboration between librarians and virtual worlds, which is the Virtual Worlds Database, which is designed as a tool to help us find each other across the metaverse. To start with, we would like to highlight how we got to where we are today as virtual world librarians. Now, I know this slide is a bit busy, so you can maybe come back and read it if you want to. But in 2003, the place we know as Second Life opened, and librarians immediately saw the value of the platform for immersive learning and global connectivity. By 2006, the Alliance Library System was looking at Second Life as a way to provide some library services to a new generation of users. Many of these users are those comfortable with looking for information on the internet and want the added convenience of not having to leave home to get it. In 2007, the first major Second Life library was born, the Info Archipelago, which had almost 40 islands associated with it. And when half an island was offered to the American Library Association, the ALA also opened a space in 2007. As many of you are probably aware, in 2011, Linden Labs discontinued the educational discount that the libraries had enjoyed up until that point, and the increase in cost meant that many institutions closed down their spaces in Second Life. And while the ALA may have lost their virtual space and the Info Archipelago greatly reduced its footprint, many librarians never gave up on virtual worlds as a platform for remaining relevant in a digital world, and it managed to maintain a presence here in the virtual community library. The Community Virtual Library, the space that we are sitting in here today, is a piece of the Info Archipelago that still exists. It has recently seen a resurgent interest in using the virtual worlds for collaboration by the ALA. In fact, the ALA has come here a couple of times to talk about how they can collaborate with CVL. As I've mentioned, librarians have been in the forefront of using virtual worlds, both for delivering digital library services, but also for teaching. Librarians at several universities have created programs that you may already know about. I recently finished a master's in library and information science at San Jose State University, where I focused on technologies for distance education, especially using virtual worlds. That would not have been possible if the SJSU iSchool didn't already have a presence here. I took courses where I was completely immersed in Tudor England, in Renaissance Italy, and in Revolutionary France. I learned how to create learning experiences and design courses along with people from all over the world. We also visited many of these other universities listed here as part of our curriculum. Interestingly, the courses I took were taught by one of the founders of the Alliance Library System. Just from my experience as a student here, the dedication of librarians here have advanced the use of virtual worlds for education as well. Okay, so there are several virtual worlds today that librarians are involved with. Second Life is only one of those, albeit probably the most populous one. It was also the first open sim-based world to open, the beta of which was in 2002. Today, as of April 2017, there are over 49.5 million residents. This number is a little misleading, however, because many people, myself included, have more than one avatar. And there are close to 24,000 regions, and residents can buy virtual goods either in-world or on the Metaverse's largest online market. Probably the biggest drawback to Second Life is the cost. This slide shows just how expensive it really is, although it is cheaper for libraries now that Linden Labs brought back the educational discount. So the main library in Second Life is the Community Virtual Library. As I mentioned before, many of the librarians associated with CVL have been in Second Life since the Info Archipelago established a presence here. You will find many of the traditional librarian services provided here, like a staffed reference desk, rotating exhibits, and even a book club. You will also find non-traditional activities that would not even be possible in the real world, such as teleporting to different worlds. So I wanted to point out CVL's vision and mission statements, as these highlight the differences between virtual and physical libraries. The vision for CVL is to have virtual spaces for learning, resource sharing, and exploration. And CVL is the hub that connects digital citizens in virtual worlds with the information and the resources that they seek. Now, another example of a space in Second Life run for and by librarians is VCARA, or the Virtual Center for Archives and Records Administration. The iSchool Island itself has been around since 2007 and is run by the San Jose State University iSchool. VCARA was established in 2009 as a space for librarians and archivists in training. The mission for VCARA is to provide virtual space and resources for those interested in any aspect of information science, including archives, education, libraries, records, and special collections, in order to communicate, collaborate, and exchange information, showcase accomplishments, educate, and innovate outside of the formal classroom structure. Now, another virtual world with a library is InWorldz. InWorldz opened in 2009 and is significantly smaller than Second Life in terms of users and regions. Many of the residents in InWorldz left Second Life because of cost. And as you can see from this slide, InWorldz is very cheap compared to Second Life. And not just in terms of money, but in number of allowed primitives as well. Now, this is a picture of the library in InWorldz. The Sundalan Community Library was established in 2011 by Alexina Proctor and Prax Mary Jazz, librarians who moved from Second Life to InWorldz. The library focuses mainly on the community interests in InWorldz, such as fantasy, sci-fi, and folklore. In addition to a reference desk, exhibit halls, and book collections, Sundalan has a separate theater building for plays and lectures. And a branch of Seanchai Library can also be found on the grounds of the Sundalan Community Library. As you are probably aware, Seanchai has a presence in Second Life, but they are also in InWorldz and Kitely. Having a venue that focuses on storytelling is a perfect match for any virtual library, and Sundalan is no exception. Kitely is yet another virtual world that hosts several libraries. As you can see from this slide, Kitely is bigger than InWorldz, but smaller than Second Life. It is also much cheaper than Second Life and InWorldz. The biggest difference between Kitely and other virtual worlds is that it uses an on-demand model, which means that a world is not actually persistent like they are in Second Life and InWorldz. The only time a world exists in Kitely is when someone is actually there. So that makes it cheaper because the vast majority of the worlds are only being visited a fraction of the time in a 24-hour period, so server space can be reused for different worlds. So one of the things Val will be talking about in more depth is the idea of Metaverse Libraries. Metaverse Libraries is a space in Kitely which houses branches of libraries from across the metaverse. Metaverse Libraries is the brainchild of Val, Alyse, and myself that came about as a result of wanting to find a space that highlights the existence of libraries and librarians in all virtual worlds. Our 4-region space houses a branch of CVL, the Sendelon Community Library, Vicara, and a special library for a space I'm also developing in Kitely. And here's that space. The STEM for Girls Island is an island I'm developing for K through 12 grades, teachers, to learn how to encourage girls to consider STEM, or science, technology, engineering, and math, careers. Part of that effort includes a library with resources for teachers, librarians, and even kids. While the focus here is on education, since there are extensive resources in the library, a branch of this special library belongs on Metaverse Libraries. And with that, I'm going to turn this over to Val. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Marie. Excellent. I apologize for my voice if it's sounding a little bad. I had some voice technical problems this morning, so I'm on a different, unfamiliar viewer. But that's the nature of the game in virtual worlds, constantly learning, changing, upgrading. And that speaks to my slide here, my first slide, which talks about the big picture, which is not always easy to understand. We're constantly juggling and learning when we're involved in technology tools. And I wanted to point out that predicting the future of virtual worlds like Second Life is really impossible, especially as we think about all of the things coming into mainstream use today, such as virtual reality headsets, and even augmented reality. Perhaps some of these things will merge together, but for now, we really believe in the potential for immersive learning in virtual worlds. Could you type a Y in text chat if you are able to hear me, just to double check that my voice is coming through? Great, thank you. You've already heard my introduction that my PhD was in library and information science. My dissertation was actually called Factors Contributing to the Adoption of Virtual Worlds for Librarians. So I'm definitely committed to understanding the usefulness of virtual worlds for libraries. And I think this MOOC already has really illustrated the potential for education in virtual worlds. I think we all can sometimes feel overwhelmed with the complexity of juggling all of the technology tools that we come across. So I truly believe that only together can we find and understand the best practices in virtual worlds. We can't do that all by ourselves, alone, in isolation. So librarians, what do we do actually? Librarians serve people who need information. So as virtual world librarians, we can ask, what information needs can best be served in a virtual world? We can also ask, what can we offer in a virtual world that cannot be delivered in a physical world? Well, the more you explore virtual worlds, the more you can understand some of these things, such as global connectivity. Distance is completely irrelevant. We can teleport wherever we want to go, which of course is very cost effective. that sense of presence that we have here, for librarians, we can see that as not just reading a book, but entering the book ourselves together to explore it, any kind of content. We can help people navigate all of these information landscapes as librarians, just like we help them in the physical world navigate the information landscape. We can also help people understand how to evaluate content, which today is becoming a personal responsibility. We have the opportunity for very creative programming in virtual worlds, much beyond what we can offer in a physical brick-and-mortar library. And we also have the opportunity for something I feel is really becoming essential in global digital participatory culture. And that opportunity is to help people understand digital citizenship. So while we're exploring ways to meet those needs, my colleagues and I have found that learners and educators are not only in Second Life, but they're also in other virtual worlds. And so that led us to think about building a virtual community resource network. And so we started thinking about the future of libraries. And as Marie mentioned, and I'll elaborate a little bit, we thought of the concept of Metaverse Libraries being all around various virtual worlds as they are evolving. And I wanted to ask how many of you have been to another world besides Second Life. If you would type in the text chat your answer. If you've been to another virtual world, and some of you have, you'll often find that you run into someone that you've already met in Second Life, because Second Life is one of the first and most widely recognized virtual worlds. Has that happened to you? And I'll bet if it has not happened to you yet, if you're new to Second Life and if you go to another virtual world, that will happen to you. So we want to emphasize that the Community Virtual Library, or CVL, continues to have a home base here in Second Life, as long as that is a sustainable possibility. And we want to continue using this as the hub of virtual world libraries. But we also wanted to expand, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that. But first, since this is our hub, and I mentioned the essential, critical importance of digital citizenship, I wanted to point out our current project here at the Community Virtual Library, which was also featured at the Second Life MOOC 2017 just last week, the Digital Citizenship exhibit. This exhibit has presentations that include all kinds of perspectives on the personal responsibility that we all now have living in digital culture. Whether one is from age 5 in kindergarten through 95, we all have access to information like we have never had before. And we're personally responsible for that information that we choose to intake daily on our mobile devices that are in our pockets. And we're also responsible for what we upload online. So between now and August 31st, our goal is, we have this exhibit open and then it will close. Our goal, immediately following the close of the exhibit, is to build a permanent exhibit or a digital citizenship museum in the virtual world of Kitely. So providing information literacy, or meta-literacy, some people are beginning to call it, and programming about meta-literacy is top priority today. And meanwhile, we're also exploring other worlds with the goal of connecting learning communities. So as I said, it's not always easy to navigate all of these spaces, especially learning not only to learn the interface of Second Life, but then to also learn how to navigate the way to other virtual worlds. So we wanted to find a way to help people navigate those spaces. So the Community Virtual Library built a spaceship to blast off to other worlds. Our idea was to put information on how you could get to different virtual worlds up in a spaceship, and call it the Hypergrid Resource Center. And you will find it just up the hill to my right. To your left, just up the hill, is the spaceship. And I think that's a good metaphor, but it's certainly not the only metaphor that you might consider helpful in navigating all these various virtual worlds. In Kitely, Marie and Alyse and I found a lighthouse, and we started thinking, what a great metaphor for pointing the way to information. If that's what librarians strive to do, a lighthouse might be a really great icon to where people might go to find the information about connecting various virtual worlds for learning. the community virtual library is a real library in a virtual world. And so now we are expanding that concept to new branches outside of Second Life. And because we're not tied to any one specific institution or one physical space, such as a public library, we welcome volunteers from around the globe, just as a public library really relies on friends of the library and volunteers. Because sharing the great work of other people and what they are doing and building in these virtual spaces, the high quality that is being created, it's a way that we can curate and build virtual world libraries. So connecting people with information, including virtual world communities, and the immersive learning spaces where they are working, that is essential to utilizing virtual worlds for learning. And the only way that those connections can be made is through many people collaborating on a global scale. So we started this concept of Metaverse Libraries last year, and we began to offer some tours. So far, we've taken educators, librarians, learners, really anyone who's interested in branching out and exploring these virtual worlds into Kitely. We had a tour in Kitely, where we also have the Community Virtual Library, as Marie talked about, as well as her STEM for Girls library, and there's a Vicara branch there. We also have taken tours to InWorldz and to Avacon, which has an amazing research library with great open source access research materials and databases. We recently toured Cyber Lounge, which is a completely web-based library. And so I'm going to tell you just a little bit about some of these libraries. When you think about branching out to other virtual worlds, we started getting this idea about what it means to create a virtual world library. Each library is unique. And I think finding a specific niche for the library is essential. There really is no need to create a virtual world space that simply links the user to content that's on the web. I mean, why have the virtual world? They can just go to the web, right? So instead, a virtual world library needs to present content that cannot be found elsewhere, either simply on a web page or in a virtual, in a physical library. So as an example of that, there are great big conference areas that can be found in virtual worlds. On our new space in Kitely, we have a great big conference center. It's a great space where people could come, meet, and interact. But coming into a world that's empty provides little satisfaction. It is people in virtual worlds that make immersive learning possible. So I think that having a clear purpose and a target audience or a specific niche, that gives the foundation for a virtual world space and for a virtual world library. So as Marie mentioned, in InWorldz, Sendaland Library really is a great example of a specific niche for a virtual world library. It is just gorgeous. It's a fantasy library. It allows the user to come in and enter and feel as if they're transported and they're entering a fantasy portal. Where you can talk about fantasy and sci-fi literature. And that sense of presence in a virtual world is really, it is illustrated well here in Sendaland. And if you've been in virtual worlds for very long, you most likely have heard people talk about the steep learning curve that we all encounter, learning how to navigate the interface. And this has been an obstacle, we believe, especially for educators. It's hard to get buy-in when they have to spend so much time learning just the tool before they can embed any meaningful content. So recently, we, the Community Virtual Library and Metaverse Library Tours, took a tour of Cyber Lounge, which is a web-based virtual world. It requires no download, and you simply log on and you can enter. So we're going to also be doing another tour of the virtual library, Community Virtual Library in Cyber Lounge later on this summer. If you're not in the Second Life Library 2.0 group, you might consider joining that so you can get information about some of these upcoming tours. Librarian Mel Kropitsky, who is the main librarian over at Rockcliffe Library in Avacon, she recently took us to this amazing space. And it was, this amazing space is a hypergrid train station. It's a space that shows the incredible number of virtual worlds that are available. So as avatars, when we hypergrid jumped over to this train station, we walked up to a great big sign, a huge sign with various virtual worlds, with numbers after numbers after numbers of different trains that you could enter to hypergrid throughout the OpenSims. There were many, many trains, and to find the hypergrid train for the world that we wanted to visit, our avatars walked through this train station. I wanted to point this out because I found it mind-boggling. I realized that I was actually feeling like I was in a real train station, but the station was taking me to a different world. So I really wanted to share this metaphor because it emphasizes that we cannot learn best practices in virtual worlds without connecting with others. And so as a librarian, I began years ago with the Community Virtual Library, working at the reference desk. And I would sit at the virtual reference desk and often wait for residents to come in and maybe ask me a question. But it can be isolating and very lonely to sit at a virtual world desk just waiting for someone to come in to ask the question. We're beginning to realize that keeping that model of a physical reference desk is not the way to really envision the future of virtual world libraries. After years now, we're beginning to redefine virtual world librarianship only through connecting people with virtual communities, just like we help connect people with books in a physical library. That is the way that we can help people to utilize virtual worlds for real learning. So the next slide shows Marie, Alyse, and me exploring other worlds like Kitely and OpenSim. And as librarians, we're viewing these virtual world communities as actual resources. Just as physical world librarians, we consider a book a resource. Well, a virtual world community is a resource that is highly valuable and worth sharing with other people. There are many creative people, artists, scientists, content creators, educators, all types of people are coming into virtual worlds, and they have amazing virtual world resources to share. But these are really hard to find. So by connecting communities of interest by specific topic, librarians might help connect people to high-quality virtual world spaces. And as I see people in the physical world constantly staring at their mobile devices everywhere I go, and I'm sure you do too, I've started to really believe that as whether or not one has an avatar, we all live in virtual worlds. We are all digital citizens with essential needs to evaluate information and to navigate within digital culture. So virtual world librarians can provide help for digital citizens. And so next, Alyse is going to tell you about how we hope to move forward toward that goal. So Alyse, the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Val. Can everyone hear me? Oh, perfect. Okay, let me go ahead and get myself set up so that I can see everything. And then I will begin. Okay, so I'll go ahead and use the Speakeasy HUD as well. And so I'm Alyse Dunavant-Jones, and I'm an MLIS student at San Jose State University School of Information. And I'm also a member of the Virtual Center for Archives and Records Administration, or VCARA, student group, a Metaverse Libraries founding board member, and a CVL board member and reference volunteer where I hold office hours. And I will be speaking about the Virtual Worlds database. And up until now, we focused mostly on what CVL and Metaverse libraries are doing in-world to connect the Metaverse. And so I'll be shifting gears to show what we're doing to connect virtual world communities outside of virtual worlds, and how we hope to connect non-virtual world users to our resources as well. So educational communities like CVL provide spaces and resources within virtual worlds like Second Life for learners, educators, and information professionals. And the database is essentially the online version of Metaverse Libraries. So as we were creating Metaverse Libraries, Val had come to Marie and me and asked if we knew of a free, non-coding, secure platform that CVL might use to create a database. And the database would categorize, describe, preserve, and make virtual world communities more publicly accessible. And as a result, I worked with 3 other iSchool students as part of a digital curation class to identify a platform for the database, as well as identify other helpful information, like which categories to use. And if you're interested in learning more about the database and how it came about, those details of the student project are at the Digital Citizenship exhibit, actually right next door to here. I have a presentation there that discusses how that project went and how it came about. And you'll find that landmark for the exhibit as well in the note card if you touch the Metaverse Libraries box in front of you. It also has a link to my student blog, which has a post on my exhibit, which features the poster my classmates and I created for the project that we had done during that class for the database. And so I do encourage you to check both of the boxes that we have in front of you and get those note cards because they've got a ton of great links and other information. And we also have the slide on this slide's image, is a snapshot of the database, and it lists a link to the database, and we also have a pedestal to my left that has a book on top of it, and if you click that book, it'll also take you to the form for filling out a community in the database. And that virtual world communities collection in the database is currently accepting entries. Okay, so why are we trying to catalog virtual worlds? Well, documenting virtual worlds is important so future generations know what information professionals and educators have accomplished with virtual worlds. And it's especially important because virtual worlds are ever-changing, and once a simulation disappears, it's difficult, if not impossible, to find traces of it. And there's also a lack of in-world tools for searching simulations in communities that currently exist. And then users often already know the exact name of the community in order to find it. Searching based on just a term doesn't guarantee anything relevant or safe as far as results go. And so users, something else I should note. Let me go ahead and pull that up. Something else that I should note is that this isn't the first time information professionals have tried to preserve and document virtual worlds. So we really have to ask ourselves, how is this time different? Well, there have been attempts, some more and some less successful than others, but to our knowledge, no other searchable database has been published to date, especially with the intent of connecting virtual world communities like our virtual community collection does. So in that sense, our goal is unique. And additionally, most other attempts are in the form of lists and spreadsheets created by individuals or individual communities with the entries not shared or collaborated on publicly or with a long-term plan for curation. And most communities have in-world collections of landmarks as well, but these collections are browse only and a user can't search a wall of images. They really can only browse that. And there are many commercial and individual blogs, wikis, and websites that host best of and spotlighted virtual communities and landmarks, but they're often geared towards a specific audience, like business, or a specific world, like Second Life, and they don't attempt to document or preserve the information. So these images are landmarks. They're images of landmark and community collections in Second Life. And the top left image is a snapshot of CVL's virtual world landmarks. Let me make sure I'm at the right one. There we go. The top left image is a snapshot of CVL's Virtual World Landmark spreadsheet, which is an endeavor launched by Val last year. And the spreadsheet logged over 500 landmarks important to the education community. And CVL also has its new Hypergrid Resource Center, which is bottom right. And Val had mentioned this. It's designed to help users in Second Life discover other virtual worlds, which is an excellent complement to Metaverse Libraries. There's also displays from CVL on the top right and Vicara on the bottom left, where different landmarks are listed. And each of these serve an important purpose in Second Life. They let users know of other places to visit if they like the community they're currently in. And CVL's Walkway directs users to other virtual libraries and educational communities. Vicara's Wall offers many landmarks and communities that might be of interest to students. Unfortunately, there's no way to explore the displays outside of Second Life, and there's no way to link directly to other worlds like Kitely or InWorldz from Second Life. Additionally, the communities have similar goals and their resources overlap, which means that two people have spent a lot of time on something very similar. So the Virtual Worlds Communities database, or collection in the Virtual Worlds database, will allow users to search and browse past and active virtual communities from online, regardless of whether they've ever set foot in a virtual world. And our hope is that this will inspire partnerships, increase virtual world participation in education and information communities, and contribute to the document of virtual worlds, or the documentation of virtual worlds. So I mentioned the database is active, and I'd like to take some time to discuss its current progress. The Virtual Worlds database consists of two collections currently, the Virtual World Communities and Virtual World Landmarks collections. And the Landmarks collection was informed by CVL's Landmark spreadsheet. We aren't currently adding to it, but we will continue to curate that collection, and we may continue to build to it in the future. The Virtual World Communities collection is our current focus and the inspiration for building the database. But what's the difference between landmarks and communities? Well, landmarks represent a specific space or object, like CVL's main library building or its Hypergrid Resource Center. Communities span many spaces and are more activity and citizen-focused. So communities are less tangible. They host book discussions, conferences, or parties, and they often use landmarks as meeting spaces, but they aren't necessarily tied to one spot. Now, we anticipate the database will evolve as we build our current collections and acquire more collections. And right now we're focused on building the Virtual World Community collection and maintaining and improving the Virtual World Landmarks collection. But in the future, we'd like to interlink collections, like CVL's main library landmark could be linked to their community landmark for CVL, for example. You might be able to hop between the two collections and see how they connect. And other collections that we might consider include an archives for retired communities, projects and sims, biographies of important figures in virtual worlds, images and machinima, published virtual worlds research, and virtual worlds conferences. Those would all be pretty cool to include. So my next couple slides address the categories for the Virtual World Communities collection. They were advised by ISO standards as well as metadata research on documenting virtual worlds. And some of the categories are self-explanatory, like community name, and other categories might not apply to all communities. So for example, Vicara's parent organization is San Jose State University, but CVL's current parent organization is itself, meaning that it doesn't have one. This, I think, will change in the very, very near future, but currently it's not. And so it doesn't really, in the database right now, have anything listed for that section. And many exist similar to that. And also with the websites, not all of the different communities have their own websites. Some of them exist only in World. So some of the categories, let's see. Oh yes, we differentiate between community founders and community owners or leaders in the event that leadership has changed over the years. The brief description can be a tagline, a mission or vision statement, or any other paragraph or two describing the community and its purpose. Community focus offers categories to choose from based on common community types. You can select multiple categories, and the other option allows you to enter new categories. And you'll see that for a lot of these, there's that other option. And then maturity rating helps users gauge audience level, and it's based on Second Life ratings, which may be helpful to an elementary school teacher, for example, looking for age-appropriate content for their students. So some of the categories on this slide are a little bit more confusing. Target audience is similar to maturity rating, so it's just a little bit more specific. Platform is a little more technical. It's okay to leave this blank if you're not sure. CVL volunteers will be happy to investigate. It's just that it's important to have because of access issues. Some people, for example, if it's online, if it's a web-based, it might be easier for them to get to versus having to download a viewer. That can be pretty simple. And likewise with if it's an OpenSim or not. Virtual worlds allow you to select where the community exists. Second Life, Kitely, and InWorldz are listed as common worlds, but there are many others, so you can definitely use the other option to fill in the world. And we can add more common worlds as we find them, as more people participate in the database and add entries. And then the virtual world of main community branch is an important one. Some communities only use one world, but others, like Seanchai, use several. However, there is often a main world, the home base where board meetings are held, for example. Another way to think of the category is as main community presence or space. And if a community doesn't have a main space or branch in a particular world, I'd recommend maybe checking other and typing nomadic, or just saying there is no home branch or world, just if you have a kind of exception like that. And then the community's main branch InWorldz URL is also required. And this might be the SL URL, the slural in Second Life, for example. However, similar to the main branch category, if the community has no main InWorldz URL, you might simply specify that. For example, there is no main InWorldz URL. Contact this person or check the blog for meeting locations. That's certainly acceptable. And then audio-visual requirements is an accessibility issue. It's okay if you're unsure, but some communities like Virtual Ability Inc. are especially dedicated to access. And Vicara is another example where it provides closed captioning for presentations whenever possible. Now, language is, of course, helpful because there are a lot of virtual worlds that span the globe, and so we have English as the main option. But that's another one where we might add more categories as we find more common languages. And then the usage rights and permissions and restrictions and limitations are probably the most confusing categories. But with the other categories, it's totally fine to leave them blank. And CVL volunteers will investigate for you, for sure. An example of usage rights or permissions might include copyright information. And then I'm going to go ahead and I do have an example there. For example, if a place like Cyber Lounge had copyright limitations, it's owned by one person. And so he could. I don't think that he does, thankfully, but he could. So those are the sorts of things that might be helpful to know. And then kind of the same for, let's see, as an example of the restrictions and limitations of Vicara at its status as SJSU students. Oh, yay, Edward, you're awesome. So I just have some examples there of what those could be. I'm going to go ahead and breeze past because I know we're running out of time. I want to make sure that everyone can see all of the presentation. Okay, so as I've mentioned, the database is live. Oh, thank you. The database is live and searchable, and this slide demonstrates a few ways you can access the database, and we have an easy-to-remember URL here for that. And then we also, you can view the database on your mobile devices. It has a responsive web design, which is kind of cool. And so, let's see. Yes, so that's the first image is just of my iPhone. I took a picture of what the website looked on my iPhone, and then the second image is of the iPhone app. And so Airtable is free to use, and I do recommend it if anyone else would like to try it for their own platforms. The app is more specifically for editing the database, and so that would be something that any volunteers helping to catalog would probably be using, and again, you might use it for your own. Yeah, I was happy to see it on Android as well. It was kind of cool to have both. Okay, and then yeah, the other thing that I wanted to mention was that CVL would also like to embed it into their website, and so that's something that we'll be looking to in the future. And I have CVL's new website listed here. A lot of you might be familiar with infoisland.org, but that's the new one that we're migrating to. Okay, so something cool about Airtable is that it offers two ways to view the database. And the main view looks similar to a spreadsheet that you might create in Excel or Google Sheets. And the gallery view allows for easier browsing, and it's designed for kind of a quick peek at important entry info, and then you click the entry and you get to see its full record. Okay, and then you can also find information in different ways. You can sort, filter, and group by different fields or categories. This is kind of where this is why we didn't want to just use a locked down Google Sheet. There's a lot more ability here. And so you can sort, filter, and group by different fields, but you can also use more advanced filters, both by categories as well as specific keywords that the entry should or should not contain, or you can just conduct a simple keyword search. Okay, so if building and maintaining the Virtual Worlds database sounds like a lot of work, you're right, and we can totally use all the help that we can get. And I have all of the positions that we would like listed. If you click the CVL little box cube, you can get the note card of the positions and the descriptions and kind of the skills we're looking for. So please take a copy of that, and it also lists other volunteer positions that we need help with for CVL in general. But basically, we need fact checkers, which would be really cool. And that might appeal to the investigators among us. And we also need folks willing to visit communities and reach out to community leaders that they'll make sure that the information in the database is accurate as possible. That's for the fact checkers. And then if you have cataloging or database entry experience, we are looking for a few people to help add entries to the database. And it'll require a commitment because you'll need an Airtable account, and we'll also need to give you permission to edit the database. And then we'd also like to create or locate a Virtual Worlds glossary to advise the database and users. So this will require knowledge of controlled vocabularies and how they might apply to databases. So that's where the MLIS degree might come in handy if you're interested in library science. Now, if you have, let's see. Yes, we would like to add our, I mentioned that we'd like to add to the website, we'd like to integrate it. And so we do have a webmaster, and I think she might be up for it, but that may be something that we need help with in the future. And then backups are really, really important for databases like this. And so we currently back up things with spreadsheets, but we would like someone with XML experience to help out with that too, if possible. And then finally, it would be great to have some long-term IT volunteers that are able to help us if we wanted to try to find a more complicated database or an open source database to put the website in or the database in, and then also to kind of help support those implementations. So that would be nice if we could find some long-term IT people kind of on our wish list, I suppose. Okay, so if you're unable to commit as a more specialized volunteer, there are other ways that you can help us out. You can take a moment to enter your favorite community or communities into our Google form, and that's also listed on the pedestal. And I have the little URL there. You can just take a look at the database, and you could let us know if there's something confusing or missing or incorrect. And you can share the database link with others, recommend the database to colleagues. You can use the database, browse to see what's there. Are you looking for a community to join? Do you have a blog maybe and you'd like to feature a community? And finally, if you have your own spreadsheet or database, we would love to collaborate with you. We might be able to discuss how we can integrate the stuff with each other. So that would be really cool. And then I have the information as well for if you touch the box. I don't know that we've used the brain before, Fidget. I see. So yeah, it just I have some information here. Please feel free to contact Valerie if you would like to help out. And if you touch that box, it has our email addresses and all of the volunteer positions that we're looking for. And so next up, that kind of concludes my part of the presentation. Basically, now you can take a moment and enter your favorite community. So yes, it'll be hosted by Val, and I'm going to go ahead and sit down, and we have our little pedestal with the book here. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks so much, Alyse. I'm just so impressed with the start of the Virtual Worlds database. It's amazing. Her enthusiasm as a cutting-edge librarian, just beginning her career, is just so exciting. And you know, she just told you that you can click on this pedestal that I'm standing near. And I just want to re-emphasize that if you fill out the form, if there's any part of the form that you don't know, that's okay. Just leave it blank, because it's going to be a growing and evolving database, and we just really want to kick it off and get some momentum going with many entries. So even if you choose one specific place that you really think is worthwhile in a virtual world, put it in there, and and that's a start. And we can try to fill in the gaps for the different fields that we might not have at first. So I'm going to ask both Alyse and Marie to help if there are any questions at all about connecting virtual world communities and virtual world librarianship. Feel free to ask us any questions. As Alyse said, we do want to challenge you to click on that form and at least put in what, and it's okay if it's a duplicate. If it turns out that you have a favorite community and it's already in there, it's not going to hurt anything. Just think for a minute of your favorite virtual world, high quality space or community, and type it in, and you'll have at least contributed a little bit if you believe in the potential for virtual world learning as we do. So what other worlds have you explored beyond Kitely and Avacon? Alyse, Marie, you want to mention? I will mention Slabber Lounge, and that Edward Tarber, who's here, has created that web-based world, and we will be going in again later in the summer. So look for announcements at the Second Life Library 2.0 group in Second Life. We've been into DigiWorlds, but we have not provided a tour there as of yet. but we're looking at other worlds that are similar on the OS grid.
Right. So there are, I would say, hundreds of worlds out there on the hypergrid, and I have actually been to quite a few, and the reason why is because if you start out in Kitely, if you have an account in Kitely and you want to build up your island, so much of OpenSim, everything in OpenSim is free. So you just go there and take copies of stuff and bring it back, in your suitcase, so you can build stuff on your own. And that's one of the great advantages of OpenSim, is that so much of it is basically free.
Yes, and that's a great example, as you mentioned, Mal Burns, of running into the same names in various virtual worlds. Mal Burns is active in so many different virtual worlds across the grid, and that really kind of speaks to what we're talking about, how important it is that we can connect not just in one world, but across virtual worlds and virtual world communities. And you bring up the idea of how important it is that we think of other languages and being able to share resources on a global scale. When you mention for Italian teachers, we do often run into people all across the world, and of course time zones are another issue that we sometimes have to think about offering these things at various times. And I think that's why it's so important that we pool our resources, because it's such a huge idea to go across the globe, across time zones, across languages, and across worlds. I mean, that's more than you can even really think about doing, especially as just a really small group. And that's why it's really imperative that we bring as many people as possible into sharing our collaborative work. So we are hoping that each one of you took our challenge and pulled up the form and at least typed in one entry for us. so that we can see that this is really taking off and will continue to grow and to expand and become something valuable for people who are interested in finding information in virtual worlds.
Well, are there any more questions or comments, everybody? Well, Val, I'd like to thank you guys, Val and Marie and Alyse. I'd like to thank you all so much for coming to this event, and thank Val and Alyse and Marie for presenting. Again, it's a wonderful presentation. It gives us a look into all the many activities that are so important to educators and librarians around the metaverse. And we hope that you'll all join us tomorrow. I have forgotten what we're doing tomorrow, but you can check on the in the Second Life MOOC headquarters in the Integrating Technology building in the Chilbro Education Village. Just need to look for Integrating Technology in the search for a building, and that'll get you to our physical syllabus. And there's a public Google Calendar, links to that so you can incorporate it into your own calendar, as well as the links to the public Google Docs, which provide the schedule in a table. Many more activities coming as the course rolls out through the end of June. So thank you everybody for coming, and thank you Val and Marie and Alyse so much. This was a great presentation. I'm going to shut off the recording now, and you should see this on the Second Life MOOC playlist in a few days. Thank you, guys.